They are. I mean, it's been a long time since the full tilt days and Poker Stars, where they used to make shirts that were embroidered with the logos in them. But then it's like, okay, that's a lot of work. So instead, they just got stickers and they just peel off and stick them on.
Yeah, no, Kitty Quo had some of that stuff too, the Natural 8 and the GG. But all right, we're on. This is Daniel Negreanu, Poker Hall of Famer, 42 million in tournament winnings. Probably more than that by now, right? I don't know. I just checked recently. Third on the all-time money list, 6 World Series bracelets, 2 WPT wins. You finished 11th in the main 2001 and 2015.
Yeah, true story. 11th, exactly.
Yeah, not too bad. Just 2 more slots and you get the real airtime. A lot of us credit you, like Esfandiari, Phil Locke, Helmuth, Ivy, for kickstarting our careers. So definitely thank you guys for that. Even your best friend Doug Polk credits you for inspiring him. So yeah. Obviously, fresh off of your match with Doug Polk, what do you think of the overall match?
I thought it was a good spectacle for the poker community. I thought, pretty much had all the eyes tuned in. Everybody was betting on it. There was a lot of action on all types of bets, big blinds per 100, the overall match. Would I quit at the half point? So overall, I think, it accomplished the goal in that regard. As far as the end result, clearly, I'm not happy that I lost. I expected to, be an underdog going in, and I expected to continue to improve as the match went on, which I think I did. But I did feel like, I certainly, in some key spots didn't run as well as I would have liked. And that's not to say that if I would have run really well in those spots, I would have won. But I think it would have been, a closer result. Because one of the things I learned from doing this process, running simulations, is how much variance can play a role, even with, player who's the favorite. Like, he could have ran really bad and been stuck 30 buy-ins. Like, it could have, that's, even though 25,000 sounds like a lot, like, he could have been a 5-10 big blind favorite and still lost 30 buy-ins, which is roughly what I lost.
Yeah. So one of the questions that everybody wants to know is, if this were played live, you're obviously more familiar in the live setting. It's not like he's like a live donk, so to say, but how would the match have played out if you theoretically could have played 25,000 hands, which would have taken 10 eons? Yeah,
well, especially now after having even more knowledge than I did before, I'd like my chances even more, but I would have felt like the favorite on day one. Live poker is a completely different animal, right?
Yeah.
You don't have a screen with all your bet sizes predetermined. You don't have an RNG that just sort of pre-flop charts, give you the roadmap, because essentially what he was doing, and I, to a certain degree, I did this as well, is when you play live, you got to play, right? When you play online, he had, a couple guys that are high stakes, heads up crushers, create ranges for him for pre-flop, right? So he literally made no decisions pre-flop. It's as simple as me, Wayne, giving you the exact strategy pre-flop, so you never make a mistake, right? According to their, outputs and stuff like that. So for me, that's one street out of 4, which is completely solved for you, right? Where you don't even have to worry about. So I guess now I'm in chess mode lately. So the analogy would be having your opens prepared for you, right? Then, you get to the mid and late game of things. So I think live, for other reasons too, obviously, but just the comfort level, the ease. I do think, though, that if we showed hole cards, and I really believe this, and it's fine, we did it. I believe showing hole cards helped him more than it helped me, because his approach was to play as close to GTO as possible, right? My approach was to, play mostly GTO, but I was looking to exploit, right? And if someone can see your hole cards while you're doing that and see the things you're doing, now they can go, oh boy, wait a minute. For example, there was a period where he was like, oh my God, I never stacked them for 5,000 hands. What are the odds of this? It's that's because I was folding everything, right? I was overfolding during that period because I felt like in some spots he was under bluffing, and I could have been wrong. But the point is if you could see the cards and you see what your opponent's doing, you can button that up and clean it up really quickly. I, of course, could do the same thing, right? And make the adjustments. But I felt like, showing cards helps him, but playing live certainly helps me.
Yeah, so one of the things, obviously, we all play live and online, just, the bet sizing to physically put in 2.5x the pot, or just cut out 3/4 or 1/4 or whatever on different streets. It takes a lot of energy on top of the mental strategy. So you think you were known to be like a live read person. You think that
Yeah.
helped? Yeah.
For sure. So imagine this, right? So you've come up with a strategy for your C-bet percentages on the flop where you're going to bet 38% or 57% or whatever, right? Well, you've got buttons already up on the board. You just click 27%, 33%, 31%, right? In real poker, all right, there's 1850 in the pot. How much is 27% of that, right? So now you got to go, oh shit, I got to do math. So it's one extra step of thinking that, will slow you down and maybe is a detriment to live poker in comparison in terms of like playability, but there's certainly just a lot more variables that aren't solved for you when you play live. So, yeah.
So you were up like, what, it was like 3 buy-ins when you guys were in Poker Go. Now that it's over, did you get some live reads on them to help you get those 3 buy-ins?
You know what? I didn't even use them, frankly. I felt like I was so focused at the time on just putting forth the fundamental strategy that I've been trying to learn, with the 2 bet sizes, with the, trying to randomize and stuff like that. And so I was more focused on that than I was. Like, there was actually a couple times where I had a live read and I didn't call because I was like, let's just try to play, theoretically well. Had the match continued and was close and, we would have played, let's say, like the last 500 hands live, then I definitely would have dove into that for sure.
Another thing with live is, like I mentioned in commentary, like hour 1, hour 4, and hour 10 and hour 24 are different. So, when you get to later on, like hour 10, hour 24, your muscles are like more involuntary and you tend to give away more stuff, and that might have, potentially helped your skill sets.
Oh yeah, no question. Obviously, I've played those sessions at the Commerce or wherever else, or the Bike or whatever, where it's hour 31. An hour 31, unless you're Steven Chidwick or Jason Kuhn, where you sit like this for 6 straight days, perfect freaking posture. And if you're human, you end up like this.
Yeah.
Raise, bet, who fall asleep in the middle of a hand. So you're certainly going to give away more because you lower your guard, right? Most people, when they start a session, they're like raring to go and they can do the posture thing. But then as the session wears on, tendencies, become a thing.
Yeah, and one thing we know, because we play on camera, which is like, it's so easy for the audience to like judge when they get to see the cards and they get to, have all the information. Were there any hands you thought were underappreciated or misunderstood the way you played, and you felt like whatever public opinion was, or Doug's opinion or team's opinion, you felt that you did better, that I guess?
Oh, of course. Like, so, a lot of times people will comment on a hand or comment on a fold or whatever. Like, for example, we used the one where I actually folded this hand and he bluffed, but my fold was actually correct. It was a hand where, and people were like, oh, how can you fold a straight there? Da, 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 da. So he raised, I called with Jack 9 with the 9 of spades in my hand. The flop came 10-8-7 with the 10-8 of spades. So I flopped the nuts with the 9 of spades. I check raise, he bets a large size, and I check raise a large size, okay? So what that does when he calls is it's supposed to narrow the ranges down pretty significantly. He no longer has ace-5, ace-4, king junk, and he's got some pairs, he's got some draws. He's gonna even fold bottom pair there sometimes too, if it's like just a random bottom pair. So when he check raises, his range is supposed to be pretty strong. The turn card's the 7 of spades. So now I have the nuts straight still, but I also have a straight flush draw. And I have the 9 of spades. I check, he bets, I call. The river is a king, I want to say. I check and he jams. Okay? So everyone's like, dude, how do you fold a straight? How do you fold a straight there, right? And it's like, well, how many bluff combos does he have there that play that hand the way that they did, right? Most of them, or at least a lot of them, will have the 9 of spades in it, right? So if he's barreling, maybe he has queen 9 with the 9 of spades, and that's a card that he will use to, power through the hand, right? But there's so many combos of full houses and flushes and all this kind of stuff that beat me that it's actually a correct fold. Now, Doug ran the hand in the GTO solver and noticed that his bluff, queen jack hearts, was a 5 big blind mistake, right?
Yep.
My fold was a 5 big blind winner. But the result is you're a sucker because you folded and he was bluffing. So it's like, because people don't understand theoretically, like even if you're wrong sometimes, you're going to be, right? Like sometimes when you make a call, for example, you have bottom pair, okay? And the guy bets 3x pot. Well, you probably fold that. But if he bets 1% pot and you have bottom pair, are you ever going to fold? Like, no. So you're going to lose. You're like, here, take the money. But, so it's not always about Excuse me, one second, I dropped my pen cap. Yeah, so the result often, people that are, like, everyone has a narrative. Oh, Daniel will win if he starts doing this, or Doug's doing this. It's like, none of the stuff you think is happening is actually happening.
Well, you guys definitely put on a show beforehand, and you guys are best friends now. So, how do you like how your team performed? I know MJ's part of your team is live with Viacom commentator.
Yeah, we did a really good job, I thought, of like on relatively short preparation time, 4 weeks, because that's really what I had. Because I wasn't preparing while I was in Cabo. I was playing World Series of Poker events and streaming those. So in 4 weeks, they did a good job of stripping down my game, right? It was MJ and Matt Boyd as well. They stripped down my game completely and then reconstructed it, within these frequencies and these betting patterns. And we got to a certain level where, we were competent-ish by hand one. And, as we progressed, I'd say it's specifically in the first 10,000 hands of the match, they were very, very hands-on, and we were working really, really hard, going over all the hands or whatever. The second half was mostly, I still was working with them, but on a much more sporadic level. I was still working, but listen, they have other things going on too. So their focus, I think, before the match, during the first half was very on. And then, of course, by then, I've become competent enough where a lot of the stuff I could kind of figure out myself.
That's good. And this is going to set precedence for you versus Phil Hellmuth, which you guys have known each other since the beginning of, televised poker pretty much.
Yeah, that match is going to look a whole lot different. Obviously, Phil would never play. He would never do it. Play the same kind of match as I did with Doug. 25,000 hands, live, online, whatever. Like, it would just never happen. So the best I could do is I can get him on that high stakes duel, which it's obviously a small sample size with hands. But it is pretty deep. So it starts like 500 big blinds deep for half an hour, and then you're playing like 333. So super deep. And I think that's where, I just have a big edge, even though it's a small sample size. Like, the way in which he plays, like, if we did play a 25,000 hand match, he's going to lose like 15 to 20 big blinds per 100.
Damn.
He's going to lose that much because he couldn't possibly win because he has this idea. And he said to Doug, I was like, I'll play Doug. I'm like, you're not going to play Doug. He's like, he wanted 10 to 1, play 15,000 hands, one table, right? And he's like, I'm just going to limp 90% of the buttons. And I'm sure, like, ooh, that's scary. Like, oh my God, you're just going to call? What will I do? And these spots are so small. So with Phil, he has a lot of flaws in his game. Some of it, he's been an exploitative player like his whole career, right? And it's worked really, really well. However, against, higher echelon type players that are much better than me, he would be just kind of naked in a lot of spots because what's going to happen is he's far too often minimizing value in spots where, he could be making a lot more. And, some of his exploits, they're very, very good for short stack tournament stuff, but they're just not going to hold up well when you're playing 500 big blinds deep, and a guy can bet 30,000 into 10,000. You don't see that in tournaments, right? You don't really see 3,000 in the pot, 20,000.
Nobody has the chips.
Yeah, it's like there's nothing that deep. But like,
frequently
think about all like the crazy situations. For example, with Doug, Doug used this incredibly well, where he uses a lot of very large overbets in spots that put you in really difficult decisions, where he takes advantage of certain spots. I mentioned this on my other podcast, but I'll mention it here. There was a hand where the board was ace, deuce, 3, 4, 6, no flush. So just a 5 makes a straight, okay? He check raised the flop. I called. He bet the turn. I called. And on the river, he checked. And I went ahead and bet 1/3 pot. So I bet like 3 big blinds, just did a little taste, with the 5. I have the straight. Just like, he check raises 167 big blinds. 160. So like, who knows how much over pot that is, right? So now you're sitting there with a 5 and you have the straight. Like, are you supposed to call? Now this is a theory question that requires very finite, knowledge and understanding of combos and math, right? Because the chances of him not having a 5 there are very, very slim. So basically you're looking at, you're going to split the pot, a lot of the time. But when he does have the 5-7, you obviously always lose. And I don't think there's many combos that he can have that bluff that don't have the 5 in it, right? Maybe if he had like 2 7s, but I don't think the 7s would have played that way. He might just go YOLO, but that's very unlikely. So the bluff there, oddly enough, sometimes the bluff is like a straight. Like that's the bluff, which is crazy, right? Like he's actually, if he just has a 5, he's actually bluffing in that spot. So I folded, but that's not a spot that Phil Hellmuth is going to put me in. You know, it's just not going to be it.
Yeah, I mean, and also, do you have comments on the World Series of Poker in 2021? Whether it's going to be live, or we all know last year was a lot of stuff, WSOP.com, GG, and just like people like, what is the main event?
Well, here, first and foremost, you know, I'm not a scientist or a doctor, so I don't know exactly how long it's going to be before the world returns to normal, which I think would be sort of like a key. I will say that I would like to see another online series this summer, maybe, because I don't know if we'll be ready, but if we can do another online series, and then maybe later in the year, whether it's late, you know, September, October, run an actual proper live World Series of Poker. But again, that's going to be a function of, you know, distributing the vaccine, certain protocols, you know, Nevada, like whether they, you know, they'll legally be allowed to do it, all this type of stuff. So I'd like to see something near the end, and I hope, you know, by then that everyone's walking around and living life as we used to.
So this is Live at the Bike, and a fan favorite, Garrett Adelstein, wanted to, you know, play you heads up a little bit. Would be interested, see the audience would be interested to have you guys on like Live at the Bike if you're up for it.
Oh, he wanted to play. I see, that's the thing. Because he was asking me about it while I'm in the middle of a Doug match, and I'm like, I'm not thinking that far ahead. You know, I said, yeah, maybe. You know, like I'm not committed to anything. I may if I choose to take that up. Right now, I'm completely submerged in chess because I'm in the PogChamps 3. I'm trying to, you know, I'm really loving it. I'm enjoying it. And so that's been my focus right now. So I haven't thought about like what I'm going to do in the future. And after that long, arduous match, you know, I needed a little bit of a break. He's ready to go. Like he wanted to take over the second half. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. Relax, hold your horses. And again, I don't even know what format he was talking about. I wasn't sure if he meant live or if he meant online or anything, because I was supposed to reach out to him and call him back or whatever, but I just haven't bothered because I don't have an answer to anything right now. You know, so there's no. I mean, the match I'm going to play is the high stakes duel, which is kind of a fun format against Phil Hellmuth. Yeah. And then I plan to beat him, and then I'll have the title or whatever, and then I'll take on, you know, all comers. Because the way that high stakes duel works is kind of cool because you have to accept a rematch, right? So like Phil would have to beat me 3 times in a row for me not to take the title, which is literally less than 1% possible. It's like right around 1% for him to beat me 3 straight times. Just not in the right around 1. I mean, seriously, when you think about it, like, for, you know, because again, for a lot of reasons, but it's about 1 to 3% maybe. No, not 3%, less than 1%. Anyway, so after I do that, then I'm sure there'll be new like challengers, and I'll get myself into the ring that way. But as far as like, I'm not traveling right now. Like I'm not going to California.
Sure. Yeah.
You don't leave the house.
I was just throwing it out there. You know, people want to see it. Yeah, I did watch some of your chess.com stuff. Those guys are buddies of mine. One of the co-founders is a good friend of mine, Jake Severson. And you went on with like Pokemon, I don't know. The girl. Pokemon, I beat her. And then I beat Rubius, who's like a very famous. You know what I learned about this world? It's like we think poker, you know, big time, you've been on ESPN. These people, these kids are like next level, incredible famous. Like they have like talking 40 million, 80 million followers watching them video games and shit. It's like, it's remarkable. So like I wasn't familiar with a lot of these names, but I'm sure they had no idea who I was. Like Ludwig, this guy's a famous streamer. He's like, all right, boomer. He called me boomer. I'm like, hold on, Generation X, okay? I'm not quite boomer. But yeah, so that's been like really, really fun just to delve into that community and be a part of PogChamps. It's been like really exciting. Like I play for millions of dollars when I play this. I'm playing for charity, but I'm so nervous. And I had Anna Rudolph, who's a international master. She coached Pokemon and Rubius specifically against me. Okay, so it was like deja vu here, you know, with Doug and his coaches, where my opens, which I had a couple really tricky opens, they were completely prepared for it and like just totally destroyed my opens. Because in all 4 games that I played, I was losing all 4 after the opens, and luckily mid and late game I was able to win. And now I have a match against another like uber famous kid I'd never heard of before, XQC.
Those of you who are into gaming, whatever, I'm sure you know who he is. And
I'm so old school. Yeah. I mean, I saw you were in the Hearthstone streets for a while too.
yeah, so I'm supposed to play him on Saturday, but he's having issues too because of what's going on in Texas. So
Oh, right. Yeah. It's, we got to look out for those guys in Texas. Yeah, there's a bunch of people, I guess, Jay Severson has also Party Mafia, and a bunch of poker people are playing that. It's just a bunch of crossover if you're interested in that.
Pretty Mafia?
Huh? Party Mafia? You know the game Mafia?
Like from years ago?
Yeah, I mean, there's like an online version, and like a lot of poker players are getting into that because they could like BS on screen. But let's see, as you were talking about like generational differences, and that's really a big topic between you've been around pretty much since like the Johnny Chan with Phil Hellmuth when they were winning bracelets. How do you observe and like the differences of the generational differences until now? Because obviously you and Doug came from different generations and had some clash of cultures.
Mm-hmm. I would say the people of my generation, and this has happened ever since I was a kid. I remember when I was 22, 21, coming out Vegas, playing these events, and the old guard of that time, the Brad Doherty, the Doties, and the Tom McAvoy's or whatever, like TJ Cloutier, which I play a lot with. Like they saw my, the young up and comers as like crazy, wild, aggressive. These kids today, they don't know. You got to have the best of it. You got to lay down those queens pre-flop and all that. Like at a very, sort of archaic view. And I remember to myself, and I was out playing them in a lot of spots, and I thought to myself, like, don't ever become that guy, right? Don't ever become that guy, because you're going to be older someday, and there's going to be young kids who look at you the same fucking way, where they're like, oh, look at this old freaking fogey. He never bluffs. He's just nitty and da-da-da, whatever the case may be, right? So I've always taken it seriously, the idea that like there's stuff to be learned about the people that are in the trenches daily. And I think other than Eric Seidel, probably, like from my generation, there's nobody who has that same kind of respect, I would say, that is deserved, because these kids work hard. Like it is completely delusional and absurd to think that you can compete against top professionals who are spending 10 hours a day studying the most intricate aspects of poker, where you just have your old school ways of like, I'm just going to do this because he did that, like not even knowing what the hell a combo is, so just the tools available for the younger generation and the ways in which they're gamified, that speaks to this generation and how easy it is for them to get good. It's changed the game forever, for sure. Like the introduction of solvers has created a world where really top players they learn differently. Back in my day, I would play a game, I'd write down in a piece of paper. I'd write down the hand, I'd think about it, and I'd look at it later, and I'd ask a friend or whatever. There's no freaking Sims to run. You just figure it out on your own.
Another thing is like the etiquette. Like, you came from a live background, Doug came from an online background. There was a clash of like etiquette. And what was it like from your end? Doug's been very vocal about what it was like on his end.
Well, etiquette, I mean, in what way specifically?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of like social media bullying and harassing because Doug's generation is kind of the first human generation that grew up entirely with internet. Like you and I, we had like, a lot of face-to-face interaction before the advent of the internet, commercialization of the internet, like, in the mid 90s. And then that's when, a kind of a culture started developing where, a lot of your time spent is on the internet. It's not like face-to-face, because something that pre-internet you have to grow up with is like you insult somebody, you risk getting punched in the face. Whereas the internet, it's kind of like you throw it out there, and it's like, it's a normal thing now, just like throw, but it's like you're in your own vacuum of like in front of your computer, and there's almost no repercussions. Even if there are, you just don't even have to look at them too. Yeah,
you make very, very good points, and this is sort of the way the world looks today. And it reminds me of a story with Kate Hall. So Kate Hall, she was pretty infamous for being, pretty aggressive on Twitter and whatever. And she came at me, and because we disagreed on something, and called me like a horrible person or whatever like that. And I reached out to her and I said, can we have a phone call, like, and just talk instead of this internet thing, and like hear each other's tone and maybe come to like some sort of compromise. And so I had that conversation with her, and whatever. And then like she saw me at the World Series of Poker at a different table. I wasn't even at her table. I was at my table, and she just watched for 2 hours. I was engaging with people, chatting with people, friendly, whatever. And on the break, she came up to me and she said, I want to apologize to you because I saw you as like kind of a caricature, rather than the fact that you're like a real person, right? Because you have a persona now, or you have a thing, and it's so easy for people to go, he's the more rake is better guy. I'm like, is that who I am? Like, you really think that's like the be all end all of who I am? 4 words completely taken out of context. Like, there's so much more to it. And you're right about one other thing too. A lot of feuds and squabbles that happen online where people have, tons of bravery to say whatever they want just don't happen live, because people turn to mush. I've had so many people over the years where, like, online I read some shit they say about super nasty, right? And then I sit at a poker table and I'm like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, are you fucking kidding me right now? Like, you use chicken shit. You're a big brave guy when there's, behind a keyboard, and now we're face to face, and you've turned into like wimpy. But yeah, that's just a function of the way the world works now. And I will say this though, I will say that there's always been hate slung back and forth. Just now there's a vehicle for it to get to like a larger group of people, And when I have a bad day or whatever, and I do some crazy shit on stream, like, that goes out to a bunch of people. Everyone has bad days, or most people do. But for most people, the difference is, like, when they're done with their bad thing, nobody sees it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, it's very difficult for, Doug's generation beyond, is like just about everything they do is documented. Whereas like pre-internet, like, you can make up a story and it's, pretty hard to verify. But it's just a different era, because like online, you kind of have to, if you're going to make a presence online, you actually need to make strong stances and push forward. And then in live, it's like, it's a different thing, because you're in a much smaller, you're reaching much smaller a smaller amount of people. And then, it's kind of like general etiquettes, you don't want to fight to break out. Whereas like, if people are arguing online, there's no physical fight that's going to break out. So
yeah, I mean, there's just like, it's just a thing, when 2 people actually who disagree come together and actually have a conversation in person, the tone is different. It's just, everything's different, and you're more likely to come to some sort of compromise or consensus, and less likely. That's why I said, like, in the other interview, probably my biggest regret with the whole Doug thing years ago was when he was doing things that I didn't necessarily like about, using clickbait on Jason Mercier and different people that were friends of mine. I should have like reached out to him, because I was older. I was established in poker. He's this up and coming guy, content creator, whatever. I should have actually talked to him privately, in person. And it's like, here's the thing. When you put Jason's name with that title, a lot of people don't watch the video. And now you've just, you've put out there some like potentially damaging things, to him personally. And it's totally uncalled for. Like, and I could have talked to him that way, and I'm sure we would have probably come to an agreement. Instead, I did not do that. I kind of was just like, fuck this guy, right? Because it's way out of line. You're standing up for your boy, And then of course, it got out of hand when I was doing a 30-minute interview discussing bonus structures, and how what you should do is make sure that the losing players get more bonus, and then the winning players get to play good games longer and get the money in the end anyway. But you should not be incentivizing your winning players by giving them extra money on top of it. You give it to the bottom guys, it feeds up top. And that went into a discussion about rake structures and stuff like that. And it was like a 30-minute discussion, right? But it's like, nope, 4 words, that's all. Nope, I didn't say. More rake is better than what? What exactly? There's no finish to the sentence. You know what I mean? More rake is better in what way, and for who, and all that kind of stuff. So there's not. Anyway, I wrote a blog about it. That was never sort of referenced and whatnot, which is fine. But listen, I don't mind disagreeing with people on poker issues, and that's where we've come to, sort of a civil agreement to go, okay, well, we can just disagree on poker stuff, or stuff, but like, not to go personal, where you start, having personal attacks on each other. And that's a good place to be. And listen, I'd happily debate anybody who wants to discuss rake. If you want to do it right now, we'll do it on Live on the Bike. I'll do a 3-hour, and I'll promise you, by the end of that 3 hours, you're going to have a deep understanding, because not a lot of people that played at my level in poker also have the knowledge and insight from the industry side. Being with Stars for 12 plus years, being with, GG Poker, being in the industry, understanding the World Series of Poker, World Poker Tour, the mechanics of Poker Go, and how all that stuff works, and how the financially, how the bottom line affects decision making and stuff like that. As a poker player, we often just think of like, well, duh, what's best for me? Oh, free. Awesome. Okay, well, who pays for free? Free. Someone's got to pay the bills. And so I'd happily debate anybody on the topic, and feel comfortable.
You're misunderstood with the more rake is better taken out of context. So you have an opportunity now to explain how it was taken out of context.
Well, basically, so I mean, obviously, I wrote a blog about it, but in a nutshell, and I could go extensively into the depth of it, but like, so say for example, you have a buddy, right? You have a buddy who wants to play poker. He's got $500, okay? And he's like, I just want to go play in a fun game, loose game, passive game, or whatever, right? Well, if he goes and sits, in a low rate game, right? He's more likely to run into professionals who are actually making a living, okay? So he's going to lose. He's going to lose in that game, okay? He's going to lose. And he's probably not going to have a fun time being absolutely humiliated by these pros, right? He's hardly going to have any winning sessions. Or down the street, there's another game that has a higher rake, which pros don't play because it's too high. So they don't want to get involved in that stuff. So, but the games are good. The game is good. The actual play of the game is good. It's not more lucrative, right? If you're trying to be a professional player, it's not good. But if your goal is to spend $500 and have fun and action and crazy games like that, what often happens is when a rake is increased, it decreases the number of pros and leaves a much softer player pool, right? Now, I'm not suggesting that we should raise the rake in any way at all. I'm just suggesting that casinos since the 70s in poker rooms have been doing this. The rake at 1 to 5 stud, which is a small game, and I'm sure at all the other places, is much higher in percentage than the 20, 40, 40, 80. The higher you go, the more professionals they are. You want to de-incentivize professionals from playing against your absolute beginners and having them have horrible experiences and never coming back, right? Like if a new player, for a lot of them, a new player sits down with 8 pros, he plays once, plays twice, plays three, gets absolutely embarrassed and destroyed, he might not want to come back, right? Versus that same beginner playing in a pool of players right around his skill level, okay? Winning sometimes, losing sometimes. Again, overall, the ecology is getting screwed by the rake, but in terms of like the playing experience for that player, in some cases it's going to be a lot better if you use rake as a way to sort of keep it like less pro-centric. There's a game in Houston, okay, that you would die to be in. It's a 50 and 100 PLO game where they play a $200 straddle. They take at least $200 per hand. Per hand. They take the big blind, the small blind, and another small blind minimum. This game, every hand is like 10K, 20K, 30K pots. Pros would jump at the chance to get in. And the pros that do get in, they have to give 50% of their winnings to the guy who runs the game. Okay? So that seems like a horrible, it's too high or whatever. But like for that group, and for the pros that actually are able to get in it, they still see, the value of it. So I never for 1 second in my life suggested that we should raise the prices or increase the rate. What I was suggesting is as a method to keep games juicy, that is one variable that all poker companies use to try to figure out like how to keep the bots out. For example, let's say you have a game that's like all in or fold, right? That's an easy game to master for a bot, right? You don't want to make it so that the bot you can just run a bot and have that game be like beatable. It's supposed to be for fun, right? Poker's still fun. And for a lot of people that are not professionals, that's why they play, for the entertainment of it. So for them, if in some cases a rake keeps pros out because they're like, that's not worth my time. Maybe I could beat it, but it's not worth my time. It allows the fish and the live ones to play amongst themselves, at the similar, skill levels, not be thoroughly embarrassed. And again, this isn't to suggest that, maybe they'll all be losing players, right? But it could be for some players in those cases just a better environment, introduction to the game.
Well, I think in this specific case where you're talking about like a $500 buy-in, in online poker, there's like pros in like the $2, $5 to small blind $2.50 and the big blind $5. There are pros in it, but that's like a very specific environment. I think in like a lot of sites and a lot of even live casinos, what they do to encourage players, like for example, Global Poker, they have like you qualify for this thing and there's like 11-cent buy-ins for like a $500 guarantee and a $5K guarantee. You could just have these promos in which everybody can play and the site's giving back. It doesn't have to come from the players. You want to promote the players to stay just in general. And I don't think pros are going to grind out for these 500 guarantees. You can add it to your. That's
another way in which you can talk about retention and making sure that you want your depositing players to continue to play. The biggest mistake, I think, and this was made in 2006, I want to say, or actually I was telling them since about 2007 or 8, or no, it was around 2008 or 9, that the system that they had at Stars, which was
The FPP.
At one point, there was a situation where, the games were good enough at the time, where a random, kid in Russia could 20 table, right? Play with a VPIP of like 7. So the guy's just playing aces, kings, or queens, right? He could literally play super nitty and just fold, right? Not even win at the game. Maybe on the end of the year be like a 3K loser, but
Supernova elite.
But make $20,000 to $30,000 a year, which is enough to live on just by folding, right? That's not good. That's not a good system, because now your casual player who comes in sitting with 20 guys who just fold every time. That's boring as hell. And the problem is you end up, your high volume players are often going to be your best players too, right? So they already get the benefit of making money because they're good, right? Why are you giving them more money to play? It makes sense when you're trying to build critical mass and let's say you don't have enough players on your site. They're essentially props, if you will, just to keep the games going or whatnot. But once you've got critical mass or whatever, the idea that winning players who you allow to play and take the rest of your customers' money, because that's poker, you're also paying them too? No, it goes the other way. The guy who's the main part of the game is the losing player, right? So I use this example a lot, but imagine you ran a game, which you do, right? And you could send a limo for the 2 live ones, right? Or the 8 pros to, give them a little bit extra thing. If you're sending the limo to the 8 pros, understand that they would have took a bicycle to play in this game, okay? They would have crawled on their hands and knees to get in this game, but it's the actual, live ones or whatever that are the real VIPs. In a lot of the Asian private games, they have a deep understanding of this. They're called literally VIPs. They have VIP seating, they have VIP treatment, all this kind of stuff, because everyone gets it. They are the engine that runs the game. Sorry, I'm rambling with this, but there are 3 components to running a game. You have, the players who lose, you have the professional winning players, and then you have the house, okay? There is only one variable in that 3 that is necessary. Only one. Only one. The other 2 are not necessary at all. The only one is that feeds the game is this. If you take out the losing bad player, the pros won't play against themselves. Okay. If you take out the house, well, then the pros are obviously going to play against the weaker players. You take away the pros, the bad players play against with race. So the only component, the most important cog in that wheel, is the players that come in and deposit. Because games don't start with all superstar players saying, okay, let's just play for fun. They're trying to make money, and the only way to do that is to take advantage of weaker players.
So I guess one of the things is you were saying that you're rewarding people who put in volume of their professional players, which Supernova Elite, I don't remember, it was something like 120, 130,000. But they're still putting in the volume. They still need to make it happen.
Well, here's the thing, but it broke. It completely broke. The system was completely broken, because here's what started to happen. Okay, so now you have all these high volume players who are winners, okay, playing even more and more and more. So there's all this money that's coming out of the ecosystem to them, because they win, because they're winning. In addition to that, you're also giving them all this extra bonus money, right? So to fund this, you need to bring in more depositing players, more and more and more and more. But what you saw as games got tougher and few depositors were redepositing or doing it a third time. If you started to look at the numbers of a first time deposit followed by a second, by a third, the drops were 70-80% in terms of the number of players. So when you lose that part of the equation, when they start slowing down because all the money's coming out and you don't have the resources to refill it, your company's just destroyed. The way Stars handled the S&E thing,
Cancel,
the way it was awful because it was a broken promise. But the idea to get rid of it should have happened 5 years ago. It's a broken system. It makes no sense that you give extra money to the guy who's already making a living versus the guy who is actually the essential cog in the wheel. It's just completely backwards. I'm all about it. I'm all about promotions. I think you should do a lot of bonuses, but the bonuses should be redirected away from people that already win. You know what winning players' bonuses? Or the fact that they get to play in good games and win. That is you make a living. That's great. You can do that from the comfort of your own home. You can go to the bike, whatever the case may be. It's a luxury to not have a boss and all those types of things. But it's just really important to reorganize your thought process if you are a professional poker player and understand that you're not necessary at all to the equation. So you're It isn't your right to play in poker games. It's a privilege, and it's a privileged life that you get to lead in a lot of cases, online or live. But it is not a right, and you are not the VIP if you're the pro. You're the one. Like in the old days when Doyle and Amaral was Slim and them, they used to go and play in private games. Like they had to be really well liked to play in these games, like, or they wouldn't be invited. You know, there's private games today, plenty of private games that have gone private where, you know, if they don't like you, you play too slow, you're too big of a winner, they just don't let you play. You know, and they play amongst themselves. And there's nothing you can do to stop that.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But, still there. But you know, you brought up some good points, and I think Gigi has done stuff to, was it the fish buffet or something, to rewards people? You want to talk about that?
Sure. Well, yeah, the fish buffet is essentially a reward system that, you know, there's a rating system called the PVI, which is a player value index. Okay, and a player's value typically is directly related to sort of well, it's hard, rake efficiency, if you will, right? So let's say a player comes in. Let's say a player comes and loses $100,000. Okay, and $99,900 of it was all in on a hand and it lost to pros. So the company got $100, pros get 99.1. That's a really bad rake efficiency because you don't even get even on that player, because after you know, transaction fees and all that kind of stuff, you actually take a loss on the player, you know, and all that. So, you know, someone who has a rake efficiency where let's say they lost 100,000, 50,000 to pros, 50,000 to the house. Now that's a much more equitable, you know, a player. That's a player that has a lot more longevity and a lot more value. So pros still get their cut. I remember years ago, Isai Scheinberg, pros came to him from the forums. They came to him and said, well, you know, we think the pros should, you know, you should get more of a piece. And he said, okay, well, what do you think is fair for how much we take and rake and, you know, you the players? And they said, you know, the players were like 50-50. He goes, deal. Wow. Insta. Deal. Because, you know, because obviously what if they understood the majority of the money that's lost by these players is two pros. You know, the rake plays a role, of course, and you know, they have to pay it. But you know, there needs to be some sort of a balancer. So basically, the higher your PVI, you know, the more you're going to get in terms of bonuses, and the lower your PVI, if you're basically only bum hunting, you know, you're only playing in great games, you're not giving any action, you know, you win a ton. Good for you. You get to play, but you're not getting bonuses too. It's the weirdest thing. It's like we're so entitled as a community, in the professional poker community, in a lot of ways, like thinking me, and maybe it was a mistake of the golden era where we built up all these pros to being like superstars, like myself and whatever. Where in reality, you know, we're not the important ones at all.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, like, every phenomenon has market inefficiencies, and market inefficiencies are often exploited the most in the beginning, and then there's an era where there's more efficiency, and then potentially the money runs out, and you know, the market just becomes more efficient, or the demand dies, and that's kind of the way poker is. Like, I think a lot of people agreed Chris the Moneymaker winning the World Series main event 2003 gave the perception that anybody can win, and anybody can win. It's that they put a magnifying glass on the winner when they didn't show like the 99.9% of the same people like Chris Moneymaker that just busted or, you know, didn't do well. So that kind of like portrayal and marketing, you know, had people just put expendable income in there, and then as soon as that kind of dried up, the market efficiency became tighter and tighter, just like just about every industry. Like it.
Yeah. So what do you do, right? When you are that industry, let's say you are that industry, you have to think of ways of like, what are we going to do, guys, as we see things are headed in the wrong direction? What are we going to do to save the company? What are we going to do to right the ship? What measures can we take to bring in more of the right kind of players? What measures can we do to survive so that we can move forward? And that's what you'll do. You'll start to look at, you know, one option is bonus structure, right? So a guy, let's say, a guy, he lost like 2-3 times and he didn't redeposit. You're like, here, how about we're going to give you an extra $1,000 you play in this tournament on Sunday, right? Maybe that brings them back. The key, I guess the key line of thought that I want to suggest is like, when it comes to the pros, a pro will go where there's value. They don't need extra incentive. So if you are able, they just don't, right? If they see a bunch of bad, like, I remember this from years ago when after the cheating scandal with UB, after the cheating scandal, obviously people don't play there anymore, except there were pros playing there. There were still pros playing there because the games were so good, because everybody who had a head on their shoulders was gone, and all that was left was, a bunch of donkeys. So pros will always find spots, and they'll play in a sewer if need be, if you get the right clientele and the right lineup. So you don't need to incentivize that aspect of the player pool. You need to incentivize the depositing players first, and they will just show up.
Yeah, it just, they need to be incentivized, and just like there's some balance where you can incentivize them, but not, have the pro pool. Like what you were describing, the more is there's like, for that particular pool, you could just like shove them in the side and give them like free MTTs or like low bind MTTs, which these pros are just like not going to play because it's kind of a waste of their time.
Well, if they want to do that, but if they want to just play, right? Like this is what they want to play, right? But they want to play this. They don't necessarily want to play a tournament. That's a whole different animal of poker. Like some people just want to spend a couple hours, play 1-2 no limit hold'em, six max. They want to play that game, right? And too often what we were seeing was the experience was so negative because the games got so much tougher, because a lot of the money, like you said, the money starts to dry up. And as the money dries up, you have less and less depositing players, which means the percentage of pros is bigger. So now the new guy who shows up, with his $500. So a good example is like in 2004 or 2005, if you had $1,000 you deposit on an online site as a totally new player, you'll probably lose, but at a very slow rate, because the games are still pretty good. Do that today, as a casual, if you're playing in some of these places, you might not have a winning session, and that's demoralizing for a lot of players. So it's important as an industry as a whole. And if there's other ideas that people have on how to, manage the balance between the two groups, then,
have
people are
have a pool where you can only play in this pool if you have 5,000 or less hands. But I guess pros will just.
Then the problem with that is exact. So because I've thought of that too. I thought about games where like, all right, well, this is only for beginning players. This is this, but then you have people like their sister starts playing, and then their 80-year-old mom starts playing, and it's like, and again, that's one of the things difficult to police. So that's but in theory, I like your idea. You could do that live, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think global poker actually works the opposite of most sites, which is that like other sites like encourage volume play for like higher rate back. Global poker's like C50 flops, pay this 11-cent tournament and have $500 or whatever. Anyway, that's besides the point. But yeah, I mean, it's just it's difficult because the market for poker the general knowledge is going up, just like other industries. Every industry is tougher. Like I don't even know what to tell young kids nowadays. I feel like they have it so much tougher than the older generation with like the rising costs and like the standards for making money. So.
Yes and no, but I will say this: like they're just because there's so much more information available. And I said this to people, and they're like, "No way!" They don't really get it. But like I grew up playing in the '90s, okay, and I've said that obviously the players today are vastly better, right? The top players, they're so much better. However, it was far more difficult to be a professional poker player in 1998 than it is today. The vast majority of professional poker players that exist today would not be professionals in 1997 or 1998 because the amount of resources, software, Twitch streams, training sites, the way that you got better was taking your lumps and losing money, right? So a lot of these young kids who got really, really good, during the, the moneymaker boom and put $50 on and were able to raise it up, like that wasn't available to them, in the late 90s. So there was also just far fewer places to play professionally. Now, with online poker, you can play pretty much from anywhere in the world. But if you lived in Idaho, how are you going to be a professional poker player? You're 20 years old, you got no money. How's that going to happen for you? You're going to find a little game and you're going to get 20. It's so much more difficult. So it attracted people that were not necessarily the smartest and the brightest. It attracted people that were, on the outskirts of society, hustlers and pool players and, old school players. And then when, it became available online, you started to get the MIT grads, the well-educated statisticians and philosophy and GTO wizards and stuff like that.
Well, I would say that I was slightly pre Moneymaker boom, along with Maria Ho. We went to UC San Diego together, but also I've known of Andy Block, Barry Greenstein, just slew in yourself as well. Just found ways to make it work, and it was a lower cost of living back then. So like when you were talking about 1 to 5 stud, like I remember going to Luxor my very first session. I think I won like $220. You know, you can't necessarily sustain that, but it's like it existed, and you didn't have any. You weren't threatened if you were at a certain echelon or higher. Whereas today, it's just like you see this like 21-year-old kid, and like, you know, he studied, and can I still win the game? Yeah, but it's not what it used to be, and with the cost of living, it's just like not a good life decision. So
yeah, that was the other thing I was going to say too, is that no question the games today are much tougher than they were in the 90s, right? But then you factor in all, of course, like the resources available to a smart kid to get good without spending a penny, right? Like in my time, you know, now you could watch like use, you could watch all these guys, you could learn from training sites, all this kind of stuff for very minimal amount of you know, minimal cost. But having said that, the rising to the highest levels is more complicated, is more difficult, requires solvers. Like a kid now in you know, here in America, Landon Tice here in Vegas, he's like trying to be a young up and comer. Back around 2004, 2005, we saw a bunch of guys like that, right? They're few and far between now because, you know, obviously since Black Friday and stuff, there's not as many online resources for players to play, and the game's got tougher. But what I was saying is, for a 21-year-old kid, we didn't see many of them back in the late 90s. That was one of the few. It was like 4. It was me, Phil Ivey, Alan Cunningham, and John Juwan, and that's it. Nobody else. Everybody else was 40 plus, right? Because in order to play poker with recreational money, well, you have to have a job, and you have to had to live with something like that. So we're too young for any of that. We didn't have nothing. We just created from nothing.
Yeah, I guess I knew some people that, you know, also did, but we were all boosted by the moneymaker boom. So we weren't purely, you know, like, you know, you.
Yeah, well, that's since the moneymaker boom, like more people got into the game. But before that, there were very few people that came at poker, like the David Sklansky model, or like that Chris Ferguson model back in the day of, like, you know, or even Andy Block, as you said, at the early stages. They were few and far between, people that approached the game from that analytical perspective. Post 2003, all these people that were, you know, analytically sound or really good with this kind of stuff, they saw moneymaker. They looked at all these resources, found online poker. They break things down in a better way. Kids today, I was telling this to my chef the other day. Kids today are way smarter with money than our generation. Like, it's not even close. Like, if I had $2,800, I'm sitting there in a freaking 8160 game, like 1.5 racks playing limit hold'em, right? And going like, well, I hope this works out. Kids today, because they have the resources and they know how to diversify in Bitcoin, like this Timex guy is going to end up with like $60 billion because this guy fucking doesn't spend anything. He doesn't get screwed for $10. He will not. He's like, well, I'm not getting the best of it. How much is the bet? $10. Nope. I want $12 to win $10. Like, he cares about every single penny, and he's going to have a lot of money as a result. Whereas in my generation, easy come, easy go.
Yeah, that's why they're still around. But I mean, that's a good thing for society. But just like, you know, every industry is going to be more efficient, like microtransactions or whatnot. It's just, you know, we're taught to be wiser with decision making as human beings, and we try to pass that down generation to generation. But, you know, it's who, aside from, as you mentioned, Eric Seidel, who do you think has kept up, you know, in the last like 25 years and still survived?
So there are a few others that, you know, like, so John Juwanda, he's taken on a different path, but he's still really, really good and perceptive and smart and plays some very high stakes games out there.
He's in Japan, right?
Yeah, he lives in Japan. And then, of course, like, I never count out Phil Ivey. You know, he's been back on the scene now that he's got a lot of his issues settled. He can sort of come there. And I still believe, like, when it comes to overall poker, like, he's the GOAT, you know, because I don't think of poker as just no limit hold. I think of all the games as being poker. And until otherwise noted, I still think, like, especially when he's got his mind right, which he does right now, Phil Ivey's up there. But as you know, Eric Seidel's a guy who, he's always had a humility about him that really translates well to longevity, right? Because he's never been like, I'm the greatest, I'm this, I'm that, I'm that. He's like always like, I got stuff to learn. Like, he sees these kids. I remember I was sitting with Eric Seidel. It was me and him, and then, like, we were in a high roller, some 100K or something. And we look around the table or whatever, and it's like all freaking wizards, 26, 25, 24. He looks at me and he goes, they're really good, aren't they? I was like, yes, they are. It's a far cry from the days when, like, you know, poker was a lot easier, but, like, it requires that sense of self-awareness and humility to say to yourself, listen, I don't know how to do this stuff. So that's why guys like Matt and MJ, I go, listen, guys, I don't know how to do any of this. Teach me, right? If you ever get to the point, like our boy Phil Hellmuth, where he likes to brag that, well, I found these coaches. They came to me, and we agreed on all our philosophies. So I thought, well, what can they possibly teach me? Because I know everything. So I sent them to Daniel. So he says it like that, right? It's his way of being passive aggressive, like he knows everything. But if you get to that point in any industry or profession, I think you're losing out, because when you stop thinking that you have more to learn, other people are continuing up that bell curve. So you might not get dumber, but relatively speaking, when everybody else is getting smarter and better, you start to go lower yourself on the totem pole.
Yeah, but I guess like the one thing to credit all you guys is that longevity in the industry is probably the biggest indicator. And despite what Helmut says, or the problems that people have with you guys, like you guys are still around. You guys made things work. That's something that people have always, even my generation, have overrated the technical skill factor of poker, which is like, yeah, it's important, but game selection, networking and getting subsidized or having businesses is potentially more important. Like Mike Sexton, I'm sure rest in peace, but he was a fairly proficient player, maybe not for today's standards, but like what did he do with party poker, the WPT or something, and you just made more than anybody can usually make in poker.
Yeah. Doyle Brunson used to say, or I don't know if it was Amarillo Slim, one of them old school sayings about like, who's the best poker player? The one that wins the most money, right? Now, is that true? So who actually plays the game fundamentally best? Is that the same as who is the best poker player? Because isn't part of poker, like you said, game selection? So when people mock Dan Bilzerian and say, oh, he's not as good as he's not sitting down with GTO wizards. He's sitting down with half the people are blind. Half the people have too much money to know what. Half the people are freaking bonked out on cocaine, don't even know what's going on. So he's making. So if Dan Bilzerian, per se, won $50 million playing against a bunch of like clowns,
yeah,
versus like the GTO wizard, who did grind out like 180,000 for the year win. If they played, he'd be better than Dan. But in the bigger scope of things, like isn't part of poker, putting yourself in the best financial situations. I don't know. It's that's a question that everyone can ask themselves. I would say that like there's room for both. But if you want to be a professional, if you want to make the most money playing poker, then I think worry less to some degree about how good you play, and more about who am I playing against, right? Because if you're the fourth best poker player in the whole world, right, but you sit with the other three every single day, you just happen to be the sucker.
So I think to credit, you, Doug Polk, Phil Hellmuth, you guys have personality. So whatever the case is, you at least get a free spin for people to want to play with you until they potentially, you guys win too much in the pool. But at least you guys get a chance. Like a lot of these GTO wizards. I
just don't care. Like I've never cared about money. When I didn't have money, money was never my motivation. Freedom was, and that's money was a tool to get there, but I never really cared about money. I get invited to some private games sometimes with some blind people, but I don't care. I don't want to kiss ass. I'm past that point in my life. Like if I was 22, I would be trying to hustle and getting in some of your games and, in some private games and like, oh, can I get in there, and like begging to get in because, that's my livelihood. For me,
yeah.
I don't really care that much, but you're right. I could get into some good games. I remember JRB invited me to play in his game, and I was like, nah, I'm good. I don't feel like it. I just don't care. I was going to win. It's a good game.
So you have opinions on like Dave Bilzerian on GG Poker? I know some people are pretty vocal about that. I guess he made some comments.
So perfect example. This is actually a perfect example of the Dan Bilzerian thing, right? So what do pros want? They want good games, right? They want to make money. They want to attract more depositors that maybe aren't so good, okay? So bring in Dan Bilzerian, his followers, right? Look at this guy living the Playboy lifestyle, making $50 million, hanging out with broads, shooting guns, doing, parties and all this kind of stuff. And he's selling these knuckleheads, sort of like exactly the kind of players you want in your player pool. He's selling them the dream. They're like, start playing poker. You'll be like me, right? So now, obviously, people, can talk about, well, he's a bad spokesman. He called this woman a hoe and he did this. And like, the truth is, poker's like a seedy, it's not this prim and proper, golf clap type thing. You've been around enough to see 7 o'clock in the morning, a bunch of nasty shit happening at the bike or whatever. Not because the bike's fault, but people just degens, right? So the idea that here's the thing, the whole point of bringing in a Dan Bilzerian, and I said this before I was with Chi-Chi, that someone should sign him because he has a huge following of exactly the kind of players that we need to expand the game, to expand the player pool. Not of most likely GTO wizards, but what was the guy from that movie? From Night at the Roxbury. Guys like that from Night at the Roxbury, I can't remember their names. But you know what I'm talking about. Dudes like that. They like to go to the club and like to party and be like, yeah, dude, we could just make bank and get a yacht and do all this shit. Let's just go play these sit and goes and we'll destroy it. You want the suckers. He's like the perfect, if you want to use the word ambassador, he's the perfect ambassador for the sucker, if you will, I think. So I thought he was a great addition.
Yeah, I mean, totally agree. What do you have in store in your future for poker?
Okay, so right now I'm involved in the Pog Champs, as I said. So as soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to go right into the chess lab. I might even stream actually on my channel. We'll see.
I'll link down below.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I'm not sure. So I'm going to be doing the chess, and then on March 15th, I think middle of March, hopefully, I don't know the date specifically, that myself and Phil Hellmuth will play high stakes duel. But I'm not going to prepare for this thing like I did for Doug. What I faced Doug is that's you're facing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs, and now I'm going to get slow pitch softball underhand from Phil Hellmuth. So it's not going to require a lot of major training or anything like that. I already have we've played, as you said, we've been around a long time, so we've played a long time. So I have a good understanding of how he plays, and he thinks he knows how I play. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that'll be a nice little spectacle. And he's going to lose. And I'm hoping that this is my goal. I'm hoping that by the time it's over, he has a deeper appreciation for what this younger generation understands about poker that he has no clue of. None.
I think he's just one thing that even though it was in easier eras, him having 15 bracelets is still, quite an achievement. And the thing is, he's setting his own rules of what the best poker player is. The problem with poker is there's never been a definition of a solid definition of what the best player is. And even just you've said that there's so many different games. Some people are no-limit hold'em specialists. Doug Volk said until the main event is PLO or whatever, deuce to 7, no-limit hold'em is the televised standard of what poker is.
And you can't take Phil's record away from him. It's obviously very, very significant. And one thing Phil's very good at, as far as, he's been an exploitative player his whole career, and he's done very, very well at it. But also, his ability to create a narrative that, us, I'm sure a lot of your viewers, they know poker. They know the guys like Garrett Adelstein are the killers. They know guys like Jason Kuhn and Chidwick and all that kind of stuff. But, the mainstream, Phil Hellmuth, he's the best poker player in the world because he's good at the narrative. I've won 27 of my last 29 heads-up matches against who? You know what I mean? Oh, they were great players. I'm all right. Was any of them Timofey, Jungleman, stuff like that?
He did beat Jungleman.
He did beat Jungleman, right?
And the King of the Hill thing, and he beat Doug.
Yeah, exactly. So he puts himself in environments that allow him to shine. And I think he cares, mostly about what the broader mainstream think, and they don't know. They still think Annie Duke is a world-class poker player. She does speaking tours. Oh, professional poker player Annie Duke. I'm she hasn't been played poker in freaking 10 years. But people in the mainstream, they don't always know. The diehards do, and Phil Hellmuth caters to a wider audience. He's got a pretty big following, and they buy into it. He's he makes this analogy he's the Tom Brady of poker, right? Because he got 15. Oh, look at that. Tom won this. I won this. Da, 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 da. It's quite funny. And one of the things, like I said, Phil does really well is he avoids, for the most part, environments where he's going to look bad. He's going to look bad on this show against me, but it's going to be a microcosm of what would happen to him if he played against really end bosses, and heads-up wizards.
Well, I think, just like you said for Dan Bilzerian, you guys are all, with your views, keeping poker alive. And I think, the common narrative is that poker's dying. I don't think poker will die, just like, chess. It's probably defined that poker and chess are the two classic games of the human race that will, until the human race dies out, it'll still be here. But just everybody's contribution with their view, and the cooperation or conflicts will just help keep the game alive. So whether you dislike Helmuth or you like Helmuth, he's definitely helping keep the game alive.
Oh, he's my favorite player in the world to watch. I love watching him. I love playing with him. He's funny because he's genuine. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He tries his ass off and he loses his shit, and it's fun. It's fun to watch him blow up and lose. I love when he comes at me. I laugh my ass off. I stick needles in. But that's the thing. Love him or hate him, you notice him. He brings the eyeballs. And for all, all the people want to talk about what's good for poker, what's bad for poker. You know what's good for poker?
Eyeballs.
Drama, extreme
drama.
Personalities, all kinds of conflict, as you said, right? If this game was like buttoned up like golf and everyone's trying to act prim and proper and say the right things and blah, 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 that's not what poker is. Poker is, let me take all your money. Let me just
Fair enough.
want your money. Like, I mean, there's a lot more of that than there is of like this fake image we want to create for poker. Like it's this wholesome, it's a wholesome da-da. Nah, come on. It's gambling. This is gambling, right? It's the sharks and the sheep, and it's war.
So would you say that the people that Helmuth brings in are good for the game or bad for the game? Because that's really the ultimate whether he's good for poker.
Oh, big time. Phil Hellmuth brings in exactly the right kind of people. Because again, the people that are going to be drawn to Phil Hellmuth are not specifically the type of people that are going to be drawn to watching someone like a Phil Galfond or something, right? Who is much more analytical, or a Stephen Chidwick, or people like that. Like the people that are drawn to them are usually going to be really, really smart, and they're going to take the game very, very seriously. Where the people who like the poker brat and all his stuff and his antics or whatever, they're more likely to, be the kind of players that you want at your table.
I think people could learn some entrepreneurship lessons from Phil Hellmuth, though. He's really good at that.
No, he's always been able to cut out a way for himself to stand out. And this is part of why I think he always is so condescending and so like poo-pooing everything young. Like all these young, everybody was doing that because the narrative in the poker community, the ones we all know the truth. We know who the best players, well, for the most part are. And they're unsung
heroes. If you don't know, you could ask somebody who knows.
Right. Yeah. They're the unsung heroes in the game, right? Yeah. Where Phil wants to squash that narrative. That's not good for him. It's not good for his brand. The more people that know about that, all of a sudden, Phil, wait a minute. You mean these guys are better than Phil? Yes, they are. But as long as he can squash that and say, these kids, I've got 15 bracelets. I've done this. What have they done, right? He has always a way to argue for himself that he's the greatest of all time, right? Never won in the high-stakes games with Doyle and Chip and all those guys like Phil Ivey did. Was never a high-stakes online crusher, but had a good tournament career. Yet he knows how to leverage that in a way that allows him to sort of stick out. And, hey, you can't hate a guy for that, really. You can't hate a guy for that. Because everything he says, even though he's shaping a narrative, I think he believes it. Post. But some of the stuff he says is just true. He does have the most bracelets. He's got the most final tables, those are just facts.
Well, the problem with the poker industry too, and potentially as in business as well, is that you're supposed to hide your abilities. So, like, who's actually the best player? If you're not searching for, fame to leverage, then you just want to stay unknown. But
right.
Especially online, you could see who's winning. So somebody like Limitless, True Teller, Duritz, Galfond, Dur back in the day, you just see it. It's, straight up what's going on.
Well, yeah, and what you're touching on really is the ego, right? So to really be a true end boss, you want to have a humility and not let your ego take advantage of the situation. But you know what? Few of us are capable of that. I know I'm not, and I know that even like Doug. So for example, when after my post game rants, I'm going off about how unlucky I've been and just can't hit a hand. Well, what's that, right? Marketing. It's just true. It's entitlement. It's my ego talking, saying I'm losing now because I've been unlucky, right? So that's my ego coming out, right? Now, if he's the pro, consummate, whatever, he's gonna go, okay, yeah, that's what's happening. But no, he makes a point because of his own ego to say, no, it's not luck that you're losing. It's just I'm way better than you, right? Because what's that about? That's about public image too. Sure that he's not seen as just lucky because he wants to shape that narrative too. And that's just my ego talking. It's his ego talking. Neither of us are going to win a humility contest, I don't think, anytime soon, right? So, but it's interesting how it takes on different, you know, different way. Like me talking about how unlucky I am, and him defending, no, that's you're saying you're better than me. I'm better than you, right? But like you said, if you're just trying to win the most money, then you're supposed to, like the old school hustlers, downplay how good you are, and you know, so that's just ego.
Doug's a little bit mistaken. Like I've interacted with him in person, and obviously seen his online stuff when he's beating down. So he definitely has pride and ego for his achievements, which is being at one juncture the best heads up player in the world, and he's very proud of Upswing Poker. Other than that, he's been fairly humble. So it's, for his achievements, he's prideful, but everything else I've seen that he's been pretty okay with. I don't know. I haven't seen too much of anything at all.
Well, I mean, listen, there's different okay, so bragging about how good you are isn't the only testament of like when your ego's speaking on your behalf, right?
Sure.
Anytime you're defending yourself or trying to prove a point or stuff like that, that's just it's just coming from an egotistical place. It's not necessarily wrong. And it's very correct in some places, and people feel the need to. It's just like when you think of humility on the grander scale, like you think of the Buddha or whatever, who's accused of this or whatever, and the Buddha just says like, is that so? Is that so? They just, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
All right. I think that's what I got. And I did mention before, I did play against you online after you played Dream Clown in like 2005. I think you were on Full Contact and I was on Hollywood Poker. And then shout out to chess.com. You're going to go to PogChamp. Shout out to Eric Alves, JC Racine, Dino Wrench, and the whole team. They're doing a great job, especially during this era. And good luck in your future endeavors. Hope you will come on Live with the Bike one of these days, and we'll give you the VIP treatment.
Well, I don't need. Remember,
fish. No,
we just discussed this. All right.
Take it easy. Danny Negreanu, Real Kid Poker, Hall of Famer.